What were the most difficult things? Getting in was difficult. What else?
I would say, one of the question marks was always, are we going to be effective at reaching people? Are we going to bridge the culture? I think one of the hardest things, and really one of the most critical things, is realizing you are going into another culture. They might speak your language, and you won't have a really hard time understanding them.
Hey, that's good.
And, that's really good.
But if you're in Melbourne, you're going to go out. Let's go get some fish and chips, mate.
Yeah.
If you're in New Zealand, it's fish and chips.
Fish and chips, yeah.
But and the language is the least of those, because there was what I would call a deceptively similar culture.
Yep. I'll never forget that, and I was going to bring that up if you didn't, because when I was talking to you, you said that to
me. Did I use that term? Yeah.
Yes, you would use that exact term, deceptively similar, as far as culture. Because when we were in Uganda, it wasn't very similar. It was different in
Completely
almost every way.
Except language, right?
Except for language, yeah.
And language was the second. English was the second language.
English was the national language of Uganda.
Oh, okay.
So it's the school language and everything, government language. But everybody spoke their tribal language first.
Okay.
But there were so many tribes that they would all have different first languages. So second language was English, and then East African language is Swahili. So all the surrounding countries were Swahili. So everybody you met in Uganda generally spoke at least 3 languages.
Wow.
So we think of that. We think of these countries like, oh, they're just these developing nations. We need to go help them. A lot of them are probably smarter in many ways than we are. So. Yeah. But deceptively similar.
Yeah, and I think it's wise. I'm not sure I did this well enough, but having conversations with, I guess you could call them the natives, or the locals, and learning their culture, learning their culture, and even and literally, I'm serious about this one. Learn their language, even if it's English, and sit down and I tell people to do this. Maybe we talked about this. When you go into another land, ask them, what words should I never say?
Yeah.
And there were a handful of words in Australia that you would never say from the pulpit.
Yep.
And because
don't say them here, because we might get a expletive.
I know.
We
might get a bad review.
Distribute in Australia.
Because you literally would be cursing. You'd be using
even though they're words that we would not find offensive.
No, not at all.
In English here.
I have a question. What makes it difficult? What made it difficult because it was deceptively similar? Like, do you think it's easier to go to a place that's deceptively similar as opposed to a place that's like glaringly different?
Yeah, here's one. And this is, again, back in Israel, leading hiking tours and leading what we call bus tours or traditional tours. You're always working with a guide who's a local. And they have a very different pattern in conversation that can almost sound like I think they hate me. I think they're really angry right now, but they're not. You're walking through the market, and you get into a sort of a dickering conversation over a pair of shoes you want to buy or a souvenir, and you can think they must really not like me. But it's just the way they talk. And I think I crossed that bridge in one of our last tours where I had to push back against a guide who I really love. I love this young man. He's so full of life and passion when he's talking about anything. And he wanted to talk to us a lot about geology. Well, we don't take people over there to talk that much about geology, but it was just an adjustment we had to make. So. And so those kind of things where you learn their pattern in conversation, and you learn sort of their level of what could appear to be aggression in a conversation, and it's just not. It's just the way that they talk on a daily basis.
I talked about that the other day with someone in talking about church planting, that really, even if you're church planting in Florida or Washington State or California, wherever you may be, if it's different from where you're used to or where you grew up, or that you're really going into a mission field. You have to understand the differences. Florida's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say, Shannon?
Yeah, totally. And do you feel like in that instance that you're describing, like it's your job to default, like to allowed that to come to the forefront. Like you're joining them, not asking them to join you in the way that you are.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. Because it's like, that's the arrogance of missionaries a lot of times.
Right.
Like, here I come with my, and that's
Right.
what they did back in
Like
the
the
day.
Crusades
Yeah,
and-
yeah.
yeah.
And even further on in the missionary century, hey. And in the 1800s and everything, they would come in with the English culture because it was advanced and superior. And
Right.
now, in order to be a Christian, you have to wear this kind of clothes. And that's why Hudson Taylor had such success in China, because he didn't really do that.
He became as much like them as he possibly could.
Exactly. And that's church planting too. I just want our listeners to know that's not just missions, but there's a real overlap of be sensitive to the culture you're entering
Right.
and learn. What I hear you saying is learn that, especially the differences in language and the way people
Right.
talk.
Yeah. Did it take you a while to feel like you had been accepted by the people of Uganda that you were ministering
Uganda,
to?
yes, and it was a great country because they had a love for the United States and for United States culture and respect and that sort of thing.
So you already kind of had like a.
We already had like an high approval rating,
Right.
but there was a difference between that and actually being accepted into their
Yeah.
culture.
Uh-huh.
And to be honest with you, and I said this to someone the other day, that you'll never really be able to be one of them, because a lot of times missionaries or church planters go in and say, I just want to be one with the people, whether maybe it's an inner city urban thing. I'm going to be an inner city guy. He grew up on the farm in Kansas his whole life, but now I'm a city boy, you know. And there's always going to be a difference. But I think there is that, to your point, that level where they will accept you and at least understand we can be open with you and honest with you because we know you're not judgmental of our culture,
Right.
of the way we do things. You're here to learn. I think the more I look into it, the more I realize humility is one of the greatest things
Totally.
a church planter can
Yeah.
have.
Love and humility. You
yeah.
approach people
That's why I
with love.
appreciate you so much, Pastor Billy. Your dad's a humble guy.
He is.
Yeah.
I
Most
think
of
it's
the time.
more
Tell us about a
valuable.
prideful time in his life so he doesn't. No. I'm just kidding.
It was a transforming time, actually, the one that came into my mind. But I think what you're describing is there's a lot of value. What I'm hearing you say is there's a lot of value in saying, I'm a farm guy, but I'm in the city now. And not
Yeah.
trying to pretend like, no, I'm just like you guys. Like, we're bros, you know? It's just coming in and respecting the differences and being a lifelong learner. And that's where humility comes into play.